Looks like we're live. Oh, wait. I don't see you. Give me 1 second. Oh, I think the splash is on. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's take that. Now we're live.
Got a whole new system.
Yeah, we're good.
Trying to figure it all out. Trinidad Noyola, welcome to the Freeborn Podcast.
Thank you.
We've been trying to get you on for a long time. You're one of those very, very shy celebrities, doesn't want to come on the air, likes his privacy. How have you been?
Real good.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to get you on. So we have the picture of, I guess it's not up there yet, but we had a picture of the podcast. I sent it to you.
Let's see.
And Albert sent me the real picture.
Yeah.
He says this is the real picture.
Right.
He says that's your era.
Right.
So when were you when did you go into the police force?
1968. March 13th when I graduated. That was the first day that the hemisphere opened up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So your first day on the force was the day that the hemisphere opened.
Right. Uh-huh.
And then, so did you work the hemisphere?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, how old were you when you went into the academy or into the force?
I started working on my birthday when I was 22 years old. I had just come from the Army. I'd been there for 3 years, and I started, of course, it didn't start the academy. My birthday was in November, and 16, that's when I came in. And in December, that's when my class began. And then I graduated in March 13, the following year, 1968.
So when you went into the Army at what age?
At the age of 18, I had just turned 18.
And what made you want to go to the Army? How did that work out?
Well, I come from very poor background. I was raised by my grandmother, and I decided to leave my town, which is Beeville. There were too many problems. My friends, I had bad friends from the neighborhood. I had some that all they wanted to do was fight. I had others that all they wanted to do was steal cars, burglarize. And my only way to get away was to leave. And my opportunity came when they asked me to go to West Texas with my aunt to go live. And I was there I started the 11th grade in September 1963. And a few months later, I realized I wasn't wanted. I overheard them speak that I was a burden for them. It really broke my heart. I had no place else to go. And I just turned 18. So my response was when they came to wake me up to go to school, I told them, I'm not going. And they said, why? I said, I'm joining the Army today. And I wind up getting in the Army. And when I signed up, they asked us, where did we want to go? And I said, as far away. I don't want to ever come back. I was so mad at life, at my upbringing. My mom and dad had abandoned me since I was a little kid. I was raised by my grandmother, and of course, my grandmother was lovely. She always told me she loved me. And that's what kept me up, her love. She would tell everybody that would come in to the house, this is my grandson. I love him very much. So I knew I was loved. But when I joined the Army, I felt like I had nobody no more. And I wound up being assigned to Germany. So 1964, after basic training, they shipped me to Germany.
How did you like the Army when you first went in? The basic training, and I know some people struggle with that. What was your experience with that?
It wasn't that hard for me because I was always in sports. I played football. I was always in shape. I was always running. So it was a piece of cake for me.
That was back when football coaches were pretty much drill sergeants too, right?
Yeah,
Running with no water and
exactly. They'd run us until we throw up. That was every day. And it was, and of course, we were called all kinds of names. In football, if I did real good, I'm talking about practice, one of the coaches would always tell me, "That's a tough Mexican," because nobody took any offense to that. This is just the way we were treated. So I grew up, in that kind of environment, and it made me tough. So in the military, I knew exactly what was going on, and the rough training, I knew it was just to make me a man. And so I wound up in Germany in the summer of '64, and I hadn't graduated from school, so I enrolled as fast as I could in a course to get my GED. But real quickly, they told us we're going to the field. We're going to be gone for a month. So I went and told my teacher. I said, "I'm leaving. So is it possible for me to take my test?" So they allowed me. I had been in school for 2 weeks, and I passed it. Got my GED. So I had only um, half of a 10th of 11th grade education. Got my high school education. And while I was there, just to find some excitement, Vietnam began the following year, 1965. So I was safe. Everybody that was already assigned, they didn't pull you from there. The troops were being sent from the U.S. So I knew I wasn't going to go. And I found out there was a skydiving club. I saw a picture of a guy smiling as he was falling through the air. And I said, "That's very interesting. I want to find out what makes somebody smile while he's falling through the air." So I went. I got trained. 2 weeks later, I'm jumping. And my first day, I jumped 3 times out of an airplane in January '66. The ground was covered with snow. And my first jump, I went out screaming.
not smiling.
No. And the reason I went out making somersaults, and instead of falling the way they had trained me, and when I hit the ground, in my parachute, it opened up. I was thinking, there's no way I'm not strong enough to be a skydiver. And the jump master, which was a Green Beret, he was training me. He came in right after me and landed close to me. And he was yelling at me already from the sky. He says, "Trainee, I'm sorry. The pilot forgot to turn off the engine, and that's why I got blown off." So as soon as he hit the ground, he says, "Go and get another parachute. We're going up again." So I jumped 3 times that day.
How was the second one?
The second one was perfect. They turned off the engine. I went out, and when it opened up, I said, "Man, this is awesome." I was hooked. And then I went and jumped another one. And by the time I left Germany, I had made 23 jumps, 10 times out of helicopters and 10 times out of the American airplanes. And I jumped with a German club. I jumped 3 times out of their planes with Germans. And I also went to France. I traveled during my vacation. I went all the way to Paris and then traveled to Bordeaux by train to go to the best jump school in the world. It was supposed to be 45 jumps in 2 weeks. I had the money to pay. I had everything with me. I got all the way to the front door, and they turned me down.
Why'd they turn you down?
They said that I needed to have applied through the Aeronautics Association of France, and I hadn't. I didn't know that. I missed that detail. So they turned me back, and they said, "Go back to the second best school. They'll accept you there. It's close to Paris." And so I went back by train, but the French people mistreated me all the time. They wouldn't talk to me in English. They wouldn't talk to me in Spanish. I knew enough German to get by, and I wind up wrong trains. While I was in Paris, I was, being transported by taxi cab. I was going to another train station, and I noticed that the meter was going real fast. So I told the guy right in front of the Eiffel Tower, I said, "Stop, let me get off." And I called him names, and he wanted to collect. I said, "No, you were trying to steal from me." And I was ready to fight him. He left. I got on another one, and anyway, I wind up. They treated me so bad. I wind up in Switzerland. I was trying to get back to Germany.
Right.
In Switzerland, I got off and went to the ticket master, and I told him, I said, "Look, all I want to do is get away from these French people. I want to get back to Germany." I told him, and he understood English real well. He said, "No problem." Got me back. But it gave me left me with a real bad taste for the French people, especially in Paris. There were signs all over, everywhere, that they hated Americans. Go home. 20 years before that, we had saved them. 1945. That's when the war ended, Second World War. So he just, and then, here's 20 years later, and they hate Americans. That was my impression. That was what I learned. So I got back to Germany, and
How were you treated in Germany?
the German people treated me real good. They were very kind, and I had no complaints. I even had a German that worked with me as a soldier. He had come to the U.S. To visit, wind up somehow joined the United States Army, and wind up being sent back to Germany. And he was working with me. And of course, he knew English very well. All of them, everybody knows in Europe, everybody knows 4 or 5 languages. And he knew a whole bunch of languages, and English, of course. And we were real good friends. And he told me, he says, "When you get out of the Army, why don't you stay here in Germany?" He says, "People will love you." They treated me real good.
How did you like Germany?
Germany is very beautiful. I traveled all over. Like I said, I went all the way through Germany, to France, to Paris, to Bordeaux, back. But I had also gone to Austria, and of course I wind up in Switzerland by mistake. But all the country there is very, very beautiful, and I'm glad that I went. I got to see things that I never would have seen if I hadn't joined the Army. And that's why I always recommend to people, young people, young men, join the military. Go see the world. Because if you don't, when are you going to go?
That is true.
So I got to go to Austria. I went to Innsbruck, where they had the 1964 Olympics. I went all the way to where they were doing the skiing. I went to a palace where later on they made a movie where they had stolen some pictures from one of the castles. I was there in that same place, and I saw it. And of course, later on, I saw the movie. I can't even remember the name. But it was, I went into a shop where they made violins. They had wood that was over 150 years old.
Wow.
They were aging it because the older it is, the better the violin, better the sound. Just amazing things that I saw.
And so when you went into the military from there and you get out, did you go back home to Beeville, or where did you go?
Yeah, I went back to my hometown, and of course I couldn't find a job. My intention was to get a job, get
Why
going.
do you think you couldn't find a job?
There was nothing. I looked in the papers.
You mean in the town?
Yeah, and they only had to drive tractors. So I came back to San Antonio because I had some aunts here, and I told them I'm looking for a job. Can I stay? And they offered me their homes right away. And I was looking everywhere. I wind up, the most I ever made was $20 a week. And of course, the pay was very little. The The hourly wage was $1.40 an hour. I never even made 140. Making 138 was the most. Until I became a policeman. I applied. 10 months later, from the time I came out, I was in the academy. And I didn't care where I worked. I was looking for jobs to jump out of airplanes and go put out fires, but they didn't have this here in Texas. The danger didn't bother me one bit. All I wanted to do is make a living.
How was the treatment of the? I feel like my sound is real bad. No, it's like
Haven't gotten
no.
any things about it.
Interesting. It doesn't sound right. Let me try that. Anyway, how was the treatment of the GIs when you came back? Because I know that was in the time of the Vietnam War. A lot of them were mistreated. I don't know if did you have any experience in that?
No, because once I hit the U.S. and I was discharged, I didn't wear a uniform no more. I put on civilian clothes. So I traveled from New Jersey, where we were. I departed from the Army. I was discharged, and so all my traveling was done in uniform. So I mean in plain clothes.
Right.
So I never saw any or nobody disrespected me or said anything.
And so when you went into the police force, it really was just because it was what was available as a job.
That's correct.
It wasn't just that you didn't have any previous real desire to be a policeman then.
No, like many times people they ask them and they say, "Well, I always wanted to help people." You know, I wanted to make a living, and I wanted to survive. I had never had a good job. There was no jobs in my hometown. I grew up working in the cotton fields since I was a little kid.
How old were you when you started working in the cotton fields?
Well, I know that I was in kindergarten, and sometimes we would sleep in the field in our sack so that we could get up early in the morning and start working. And
did your grandmother work in the cotton field?
no, that was with her ex-husband, which would be my step-grandfather. He was very, very mean. And I never forget, he spanked me one time with a horse whip. I was about maybe 6 years old. And we had come home late from watching a movie. I was with my aunt. She was a few years older than me. And she was messing around with some kids, with some boys at the movies. But she didn't want to come home. We saw the movie twice. When we came out, I was scared. It was already late. It was dark. I said, "Oh man, they're gonna beat us." We got home. He threw us in a room and grabbed that horse whip and began to whip us real bad. I never forgot it. And the reason I'm saying this story is because later on, when I was a policeman, his daughter, which would be my aunt, had brought him to her house, and I came home. I stopped by her house on my way home. I was in uniform. And he was there and sitting on a chair in the patio, and I really wanted to whip him. He was old, but I knew that I would have been fired. But that's how I felt, and I didn't ask him, "How are you doing?" I told him, "I never forgot when you spanked me with a whip." That was my greeting. I still hadn't forgotten it, but. Of course, he denied everything, but that's how I felt. And that's why I'm just telling you that story.
So he said he didn't do it?
Right, yeah. But he whipped us real bad. And that was the only whipping that I ever got, is that whipping.
So how is it that you ended up living with your grandmother? How did that happen?
I guess he must have gotten fed up with me as a little kid. And I was going to kindergarten. And he was trying to help me to read because I didn't know no English. I had only been spoken to in Spanish all my life as a young kid. And then in school, you couldn't speak Spanish. They
wouldn't let you?
They would not let you. They'd spank you.
Really?
Uh-huh. And they'd take me to the board, and maybe put a ring on the board, and they put my nose there, and I stayed there. Or they put me on the corner and put a little hat on top of me. This was nuns. They're real sweet. And but he tried to teach me. I never forgot it. Tried to teach me how to read. And every time that I forget the words, he'd hit me in the head with his knuckles. So I had to, see, dig, run, run, and I would forget the stupid word run, and pow, he'd hit me.
Is that why when you mispronounce a word, you
Yeah.
you flinch?
Right. And I said, how can you learn this way? But this was my upbringing. And
That's crazy.
so when I went,
But that wasn't common, was it? Was he just a
he was just a very, very
Bitter, mean
person.
I want to pull his mic up a little closer.
pull that right up there?
Yeah.
There you go.
He was just very mean. And so I don't know how I wind up with my grandmother, but next thing I know, I'm living with her. I went to first grade with her. But I remember going to school, I always walked. Nobody gave me rides. Since kindergarten, I'd go all the way to school, come back. All the grades throughout my life, going to school. Many times I wouldn't make it to school. I'd stay by a little creek that we'd pass by, and I'd spend all day there. I'd swim. I'd get on a limb, I'd take off my clothes, completely naked, and I'd jump from a limb into the little creek. It was me and some other kids. And nobody knew how to swim, but we didn't drown. And I said, wow, we were terrible kids. But this was our upbringing. Nobody to give you directions, nobody to caution you. No, they never found out. But that's what I did. And,
So no one ever told your grandmother that you were playing hooky every day?
No. And
School didn't really care whether you showed up or not?
exactly. Once I started first grade, now I'm at another school. It was a segregated school. It was only for Hispanics. I never knew this. I found out after I'm retired. I went to my hometown. I went to go see that school. I'm by myself in my car, and there's a big sign in front, and it's got the whole history. And I did not know that was a segregated school. So that's where I went. The name was Jackson Elementary. But they treated me good.
So they segregated. It wasn't just the blacks and whites that were segregated. They segregated Hispanics separately.
Yeah. And I don't think I had even seen a black person. Probably I had seen some whites, but very little.
What was the demographic of the town where you were growing up? Was it mainly Hispanics or?
It was a growing community, but I lived in where all the Hispanics were. Our streets, they were all dirt. There was no such thing as paved roads or nothing like that. They had a bus that would pick up the kids to go to school, but it was a real rundown bus. None of the other buses that I ever saw were bad, but that one was. So I wasn't about to ride on that. I just walked a mile and a half, 2 miles, depending on what school I'm going to. All the way to high school, that was about 3 miles away. I walked every day. I never was late for school. Never missed school, cold day. And many times, I even went barefooted when I was in elementary. I wouldn't eat. I had no money to eat. I would eat at home, and then when I'd come back. I learned to stay away from the cafeteria so I wouldn't smell the food. And sometimes I had some money. I'd go to a store. I'd buy me 1 nickel of bologna, which would be about 2 slices. And then I'd buy me Fritos, and I'd make me a taco. I'd put the Fritos and the bologna and make me a taco. And I was happy. I never knew I was poor.
You didn't know you were poor?
No.
Was
Never.
everybody in your school basically in the same economic situation?
We were all poor. Hardly nobody had a dad. All my friends, my neighbors, very few had a dad. Most of us were all being raised by a mother, or in my case, a grandmother. And yet, what's so amazing that now I go to Beeville, I go to a gathering of the guys that went to school with me. Most of them went into the military. I found out one of them won the Silver Star, which is the second highest. One retired from the CIA. He had been a Marine and became a pilot, and got recruited and retired from the CIA. And I got a picture with him, and I took a picture of his identification. Two of them retired from the FBI. One retired from Exxon. My best friend, a block away, he retired from Exxon, and one of his sons is a medical doctor. His older sister wound up taking off. They didn't have a dad. Took off, went to Austin. She wound up retiring from University of Texas as a professor. Got her PhD. And I say, how can all this come out of all these poor people? Nobody had nothing. Nobody had a dad. And yet, they excelled.
What percentage do you think of your friends in that neighborhood did well for themselves like that?
A lot of them did. A lot of them didn't. A lot of my friends wound up in prison. One of them got killed in prison. Just tragic lives.
What about your family? You had mentioned that a lot of your family were going down the wrong path, and you wanted to get out of there. How did they end up throwing their lives away, your family, or did they get straightened out?
Well, from my father's side, I would go and visit him occasionally in Corpus. He was raising his own family there, and he wound up with about 5 sons and about three daughters. And 2 of his sons, which are my half-brothers, wound up in prison. One of them wound up getting 38 years. I don't know what he did, but you don't get 38 years for just stealing some candy. And last time I heard, he was on parole. He had been put out. The other one, they killed him. One of my brothers got killed in prison. But they had a bad example. My dad was a drunkard. That's all he ever did. And that was their environment. But at the same time, I see that it's all the choices we make, because I didn't turn that way. And a lot of my friends didn't. They succeeded. And very successful stories. One of the guys that I played football with, that grew up with me, he wasn't in my neighborhood. He had a better life, a little bit away from my area. But we played football together. He was Hispanic also. He wound up retiring as a superintendent.
Of a school, you mean?
Of the school in Beeville.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of success stories. And but we grew up nobody getting anything in life. I never got anything. My dad, I went to go visit him one time because my grandmother sent me so he could buy me some shoes. And he frowned, and it bothered him a lot. He bought me the shoes, but I swore, I was 13 years old, I swore I'll never again ask him for anything, and I never did. That was the first and last time I asked him. My mom, she never even wrote a letter. I went to go visit her in El Paso. After traveling for many, many hours by bus, the first hour that I'm there, she got me washing dishes. Later on, I was working with her husband, doing carpentry. He was a contractor. And she decided she's going to charge me for the food that I eat. And that's when I decided I'm going back home. Never went back. It upset me so much that never taking care of me. And then I go visit her and she wants to charge me for the food that I'm eating. I just thought it was so bad.
How old were you at that time?
I was 13 years old when I went to go see her.
And did she ever send any money or anything for your
No.
care with your grandmother?
Never. And many times my grandmother would read a letter for her. I was waiting for my name to be mentioned. She wouldn't. And but that was my upbringing.
What was your grandmother's name?
Victoria Zambrano. That was from her first husband, which was my real grandfather. And then she married Cázares. That was my step-grandfather, the one that whipped me. And then she raised me on her own, and then she wound up marrying another man that treated me real good. And but that was towards by the time I'm getting ready to leave the house. So we were just very, very poor. So when I was in the army, you know, the food that they give us, good grief, I thought I was in heaven. You know? And it's amazing how many soldiers would complain, oh man, this food, you know, this. I was happy. I was grateful. They'd give us, you know, even though it wasn't a steak, but it would be chopped up. I was happy to get meat. Growing up, it was tortillas, beans, rice. You know, my grandma only made $12 a week cleaning for a rich lady, cleaning her house. That's how she raised me. So I never got anything. I never got a gift. Christmas time would come around. I never got nothing. One time, she would put a little Christmas tree. I never saw nothing there. One time, I saw some gifts. It never entered my heart that one of them was for me. And it was. It was a baseball. And I was so happy. That's the only time. But that's why growing up, raising my own children, they would complain, oh, there's nothing to eat. I'd take them to the refrigerator, open it up, and I'd yell at them, look at all this, we got this, you know, beans, and, you know, whatever we had. I wanted to think like me. But they were very different. They grew up having everything. And I grew up having nothing. So to me, I just felt very rich.
Did you ever convince them that a mustard taco was good food?
No, but I would tell them this is what I would eat. I'd come home from school. I was hungry. I'd get me some old tortillas. I'd heat them up. I would put sometimes mustard, sometimes ketchup. If I wanted something sweet, I'd throw some sugar in it. That was my donut. Butter and cold beans, whatever I felt like or whatever was there, and take off, go be happy. I was always in the streets, always playing, always running. And we didn't realize we were poor.
I assume you didn't have a TV?
No, never did. We had a phone that my grandma finally put in there, and I remember talking on it. But you'd have about 3 or 4 neighbors listening to you.
Yes. I actually had a phone like that, believe it or not.
Yeah.
In Michigan, where we lived, we had a party line. And so your neighbors, very, very short time, but I remember that when I was very small, that there was a party line. And so if you picked up the phone, you would hear someone else, and you would say, hey, I need to make a phone call. And then they would say, well, I'll be off in a minute. And
Yeah, that's how it was.
yeah.
Matter of fact, even after I retired from the police department, there was no cell phones. So they had those pagers, but that wouldn't help you when you're stranded.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, things began to get better. Now I think they're awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the good old days, aren't they?
These are the good old days, man. I'm 75. My dad died at 75. His father died at 75. So I'm gonna be 75. So I'm getting.
That's why I wanted to get you on right away on the podcast.
Yeah, I'll be dying this next year. Yeah.
So how old were you when your grandmother passed away?
I was. I don't recall, but I was a policeman already.
Okay.
And
did you already have a family? Were you married?
yeah, I had a family, and they treated me as a son. They said, "So you pitch in, you're the son." So I pitched in to get her buried, and then when they were gonna sell the house, That was the house that I helped paid for it, because while I was in the Army, I was getting $75 a month, and I would send her $20 every payday, every month, the whole 3 years. I never missed. And it was for her to pay on the house. So I had some investment in it. I lived there all my life. But when they sold it,
Now you weren't a son no
I
more.
wasn't a son no more. They didn't give me nothing.
Oh, man.
But that's the story.
With family like that, you don't need enemies.
Right, yeah.
So why did you get out of the Army? Why didn't you decide to stay in?
I didn't like it. I always had sergeants that I thought were real dumb, and just a lot of little things. And I became a sergeant. I made rank real fast. I was a corporal in 20 months, and anyway, I made sergeant about 7 or 8 months before I came out. I was there for 3 years. And that's the only time that I really felt I had money. They paid me $250 something a month as a sergeant.
Wow, you were walking in high cotton then, weren't you?
Uh-huh. That's when I wound up going to go visit Munich, which was 30 miles away. That was a big city in Germany. Because before that, I never could go anywhere. I was broke after the first week of getting paid, because you had to buy your own shaving blades and things of that sort, and clothes. You bought your own. They fed you. You had a place to sleep. But then I would send my grandmother 20. I would send and my aunt in San Antonio $20.
Why would you send her $20?
To save it for me, so whenever I'd come out, and when I did, I had $1,000 saved.
She saved it for you?
Yeah, she sure did. Put it in the bank. Very faithful. And that's what helped me to get going in life, because nobody would give me anything or offer me anything. Either I earned it or I did without. So I went and bought me a car, a 19 throw it away, I always say 19 throw it away Ford. It was a 1960 Falcon. One of the most horrible years for Ford. But anyway, that's what I bought. I bought it in cash. And so when I'd go pick up my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, that was my car. No radio, no heater.
How did you meet her? Did you meet her before the Army or
no,
after?
I met her at a dance about 3 weeks after I had been here. There was a nightclub. Right now it's a restaurant there. But
Where at?
On Somerset Road.
But in which town?
Here in San Antonio.
Okay.
And I had been taken there by my aunts when I was younger, when I had come to visit, and I liked it. So I went to go dance, to go meet somebody, and I met her. And for me, and it still is, the prettiest girl in the world. And I got her phone number, and she says, I live here in Pleasanton. I thought it was Pleasanton Street. So I called her for 2 weeks. Wouldn't answer. Wrong number. I wouldn't give up until later.
She gave you the wrong number?
No, she gave me the right number, but she told me Pleasanton.
Oh,
so
you
I
were
thought-
calling it the wrong area code.
Yeah, it was in Pleasanton, Texas. And it took me 2 weeks to figure it out.
How did you figure that out?
I just told the operator, because at that time you had to tell the operator, can you dial me long distance to Pleasanton, Texas with this number? And she answered. I said, good grief. All this time I had been looking for her, but I was calling San Antonio.
Uh-huh.
So I met her. Got in touch with her. And
Was she irritated that you hadn't called her yet?
No,
She'd forgotten about you?
no, she hadn't. But I started going to go visit her. I was making $20 a week. And 2 weeks later, I asked her to marry me. And she said, sure, but you need to get a job. And
Good girl.
yeah. And I said I hadn't finished talking because that's exactly what I want to do. I'm not ready to get married until I have a good job. So I was desperate to get me a good job. That's why I wind up applying for the police department, and I filled out the application at her house. She helped me fill it up, and the rest is history.
How wasn't her upbringing very similar to yours in the sense that they were pretty poor? I mean,
Yeah, very poor. Her dad had been sick most of his life, so they received, I think, welfare. They might have. I'm not really sure, but very little. And my wife was the one supporting the family.
what was she doing? What was her job?
She was working as a secretary for some agency, and of course, to me, that was real high up. Being a secretary, you must be educated. And but she was the typist, and so she would she bought everything, paid everything, bought them the car, had an account at a store to buy them clothes. She bought for her brother, and so she was the sole supporter. And and of course we continued to help throughout our their lives while they lived.
Mm-hmm.
I even paid all their bills at one time when I sold a house. We paid all their bills. And of course that was my wife's idea. She always wanted to help them, but they were very poor also.
So you got married after you got out of the police, after you went into the police department, or when?
No, I got married while I was in the academy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So once everything got settled, I began the school. We set a date, and here's another something kind of funny to me. One of the guys that I used to work with in the army in Germany, turned out he was from Poteet. He had been my wife's boyfriend also. And I wound up meeting him, and we saw each other at the dance, and I'm with his ex-girlfriend. That was my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and we got to talking, and my wife saw us talking, and she said, "Oh, they're gonna get into a fight over me." She didn't know we had worked together in Germany.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we were good friends. So when I got married, he was one of the
One of your groomsmen?
yeah. And I had another guy that also worked with me in Germany. He was here in San Antonio. He was another one. So I had my army buddies at my wedding. And so we got married about 53 years ago. In 1968, when we got married in January.
Wow! Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
That's quite an accomplishment, especially in these days, right?
Yeah.
So, how did you like the police department once you got into it?
I liked it. It was exciting. We had to ride with policemen during the week on Saturdays while I was in the academy, and they put me in the West Side. And this is something strange to me because I come from a small town. I was used to no drugs. I didn't grow up with drugs. Nobody had drugs. We didn't mention the word drugs or cocaine or heroin. And San Antonio was full of it. And I started on the West Side. In 1 hour, we were running emergencies, red lights, guns being fired. It was so exciting to me. So when I graduated, and I requested the West Side. I wanted to be where the action was. I had worked in the other parts of town. They were boring because they wouldn't make any calls. It was just very quiet. Dog bites and things of that sort. I wanted to be where all the shooting, people getting killed, and all of that. So that's where I went. That's where I worked as a patrolman. I got into a lot of fights, arrested a lot of people in my career. I'd come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I was working the 311 shift. By 6 o'clock one Saturday, I had already arrested 6 people, all of them separately. Not because I was out there just looking for them. They'd be in the streets. They'd be down and out in the middle of the sidewalks. It was just that bad. Having the track marks on their arms for the heroin, that was common. Men and women, young people. So this is what I broke into, and then when I made detective, 7 years later, I chose the West Side again. So my whole career, it was full of activity, action. My last 8 years, I stayed on the street as a detective investigator. I handled all the major crimes.
Want some water?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I wind up handling probably 200 homicide cases. And not all of them did I handle everything, because many times I was assisting another detective, or they would be assisting me. But I'd be out there in the middle of everything, taking pictures, diagrams, fingerprinting, collecting all the evidence, and then we had to go to the morgue and go fingerprint the body. So I was used to touching a lot of dead bodies, having to fingerprint them 3 times. Because we'd keep one copy. One was for us, one was for the state, Highway Patrol, and the other one was for the FBI. And including in that, I wind up fingerprinting a policeman friend of mine that had gotten killed. I don't want to mention his name, but he was a good friend. He worked here. He lived in the South Side where I lived. I used to see him all the time. He was a patrolman. When I came to work early in the morning, we found out right away, of course, that policeman had been killed. We knew the name. And as soon as I checked in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, they gave me the call. Go to the morgue. I said, oh, no. So I fingerprinted him.
How did he die?
He made a call for a disturbance, and the guy who greeted him had a shotgun in his hand and blew him real quickly. The only chance he had was to turn his head, and it put a hole as big where you can put a baseball on his neck. Big, big hole. And I had to be touching his hands and fingerprinting him. I cried the whole time. And there was another detective at the morgue. He was a retired detective, homicide. And he said, Trini, I'll help you. So he grabbed one hand, I grabbed the other. We fingerprinted him. But he was the only one. The rest of them were people that I didn't know. I finally just got very tired after so many. When I was getting ready to retire, I couldn't take it no more. I just got tired of walking into homes and people of all ages being killed very brutally. One lady stabbed 19 times, another lady 47 times. And suicides, the most horrible things. The men, they like to make it real messy. I handled one where somebody put a 300 Magnum rifle in his mouth. There was no head left. Another one had a 30-06, put it on one side, no head was left. Another one, a shotgun. All their heads are gone. Everything scattered all over the walls. I had to go and take all those pictures. And hangings, I'm the one that had to climb up and go cut the ropes. So I saw so much of that, and you get tired of it. But it's a job that if I had to do it again, I'd do it.
Why would you do it again?
I like the excitement. I like to be in the middle of it. I don't like being a spectator. Never had. Growing up in sports, I never sat in the bench. I wanted to be where everything's happening. on the first month after I had come on the force, we had a riot in San Antonio. Had been on only for 1 month, and they called us for a big fight during Fiesta Week, during the night parade, the last night of the Fiesta Week. That was in 1968, April, and I was close by. I was one of the ones that got called. They called 20 policemen to one intersection. I said, good grief, this must be a big fight. Houston and St. Mary's. So I went right in the middle of all the crowd, thousands of people on the side to watch the parade, had been stopped. There were people fighting with the public. And as soon as I got off, the sergeant told me, go get anybody that's fighting and arrest them, and then walk them all the way to the Alamo. That's where we had the paddy wagons waiting. So took me about 2 seconds, boom, I'm running right into a fight. I arrested a guy, walked him all the way to the Alamo, came back, arrested another one, took him back to the Alamo. The following day, I found out what had happened. We arrested 30 people. We had a riot. Everyone was black, and they all came from Chicago. Somebody flew them here to come in and disrupt. That was 1968. They were having riots all over the country. They tried it in San Antonio. But don't tell nobody. Those guys weren't treated very good, the ones we arrested.
Policing has changed quite a bit, hasn't it, since you were in?
Uh-huh. They taught those guys a lesson, because later on they tried another demonstration. Not a single one got out of hand. They knew what was going to happen to them. But they met some justice. They wanted to beat on San Antonians. They got the same.
And so, talking a little bit about that, the change in policing since then, was the way that policing was done, was that like the informal way, or is that were you taught that way in the academy, or is that something that you picked up on the streets then from people that were in the know?
Yeah, they trained us very well. Matter of fact, in the time that I was there in the academy, the FBI came in and taught us for 2 straight weeks. It was 2 guys, both of them attorneys, and they had us for 2 weeks. They trained us. They taught us a lot of things. Then come the Secret Service. Then come the ATF, and everybody would come in and train us, and we had excellent teachers also training us. They teach you the right way, everything. But when you're in the streets, a different story. Very different. The things are done different. It's survival. And you go to a call, everybody wants to kill you. Nobody calls you good names. And you have to be watching your back. And we got into a lot of fights. That's how it is in the streets. And of course, nobody had cameras. Nobody had cell phones to take pictures. We all carried a big nightstick. If you're short, that nightstick is going to be dragging on the street, on the ground. But they were big nightsticks, and that's exactly what we needed. We had to use them because you're not fighting just one person. So
and why would so many people want to fight the police? Because most people don't think that when police show up, that people actually want to fight them. I think people have the idea that when the police come up, everyone wants to hug them. They're happy to see them. Right.
No, it's just that people are intoxicated, or they're doped up, and this is who you meet. Like one night, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, Saturday night, extremely busy. They send me on a call at the housing project, because I worked in the west side, Mirasol Homes, for a disturbance. The guy was bothering a girl, and she wanted him to leave. He didn't want to leave. I show up, and I said, well, why don't you talk to her tomorrow, man? Just go ahead and leave. He said, okay. I didn't realize he had a bottle in his hand. he was hiding it from me. So he pretended like he was leaving, and all he did was do a U-turn real quickly, and boom, broke it in my head.
He smashed you over the head with the bottle.
Yeah, and the fight began. And before long, I was on top of him. I was beating him, and he was trying to get me to stop. He was telling me to stop, but the adrenaline, you know your life's in danger. You can't afford to lose, because the FBI had told us 50% of all policemen get killed with their own guns. And when I retired, it was still the same. 50%
Wow.
get killed with their own gun.
So they get their gun taken away, and then they get shot by their own gun.
Exactly. So I could not afford to lose. So I'm pounding him, and I didn't let go until I knocked him out. And then I go and collect my gun from the middle of the street. It had fallen off. The holsters that we had at that time were the real rinky-dink ones, like the cowboys. Not like the way they
That
have
was
now.
back when you're still using revolvers too, right?
Uh-huh. And it's a good thing nobody was out there. They called 3 emergencies on me. The first one who arrived was a motorcycle guy. Those guys work on the expressways. Nobody else was available. They sent me alone. But every time I get into a fight, I was alone. So you had to be a good fighter. You had to be able to take a punch. I got punched, had the bottle broken in my head. But there's nothing wrong with me. You can see that. Yeah. But this is just how life is. That's why, if anybody wants to be a policeman, I recommend you.
Your stepdad had conditioned you
Yeah.
for being a policeman.
That's exactly right. I had been conditioned, to take it, and that's what you need. You need to have been brought up rough. That's why many times people get into the police department. They go north. They go work somewhere where they only make calls for somebody's dog came in and urinated on somebody's petunias. But I want it to be where all the action is happening. That's what you're going to have.
Just recently, one of the politicians in our political cycle suggested that the best way to de-escalate situations where the perpetrator is holding a gun or whatever is to shoot him in the leg.
We were told by all our instructors, if you shoot, you're only shooting to defend your life or the life of another. That's the only time. And they said when you are being questioned, if you wind up in court, don't ever say you were trying to wound them, because then that shows your life was not in danger. So they told us that. So, and besides that, if you take your gun, it's because you need to kill the person. So don't aim for the hand. Don't aim for the, like in the cowboys. That's what they used to do.
You can't shoot the gun out of their hand?
No. You go for the chest. You go for the head. You go for the kill. And if not, you better not say that, I was just trying to knock the gun out of his hand or his knife. They'll get you for... your life was not in danger. So the person who said it didn't know what he's talking about. That's the only time you're justified. And many times I ran after people that had guns, but they were running away from me. I wasn't about to shoot them. And even when they were, so of course I would shoot up in the air just to get them to stop or to drop their gun. But shooting somebody is not something that you can take lightly. And I used to argue with some policemen. One of them, very close friend of mine, that worked right next to me. We used to argue all the time. We'd go to coffee, and we would talk sometimes like that. And I'd say, I won't shoot nobody unless my life depends on it. That's how I was trained. And that's how I believed, even up to now. And he said, no, I'll shoot to kill. The opportunity came for both of us. I shot in the air, or I would hold my fire and get him to drop or whatever. He didn't. A burglar took off running, and at the time, you could shoot a burglar as long as you're standing at the place that had been burglarized. If you had a rifle and the guy's a mile away, you can shoot him. That was the law. As long as you're standing in in the ground where the burglary occurred. This young kid took off from a beer joint. He just burglarized it. My friend took out his gun, boom, shot him right in the head. He was justified by the law, but they took him to court civilly. They filed a case on him, civil case. He wound up winning, but they made him cry. And of course, I didn't know that. His wife wound up telling my wife, well, we were very close friends, that he had cried. But the police department changed their policy because of that. They said from now on, you don't shoot nobody unless your life depends on it. That happened in the 1970s.
What was the closest call you ever had as far as being in danger?
There were so many.
Did you ever have anyone pull a gun on you, or?
I had, well, I'll just give you one of them. I have so many.
Yeah.
I stopped, I saw a guy by a window one night, about 1 in the morning, and it was cold. I got off. The guy hadn't hurt me. I thought he was a burglar. I'm approaching him, but I got my hand in my gun. I'm ready to draw, just in case. And as soon as he turned around and saw me, he moved his coat out of the way, like he's going for a gun. You know, that's what I had seen in the movies, because they don't train you like this. But anyway, I caught on real quickly. You have to be very alert. I pulled my gun quickly, and he stopped. And I said, you better stop, or I'll kill you. You have to talk real tough. And I approached him. I said, turn around. Went around. Sure enough, he had a gun in a holster. He was going for it. I beat him to it. And I arrested him. And of course, the judges, when they got him to court, I went to court, they charged him $75. And I said, good grief. He was about to take my life.
Was it a burglar?
No, he was talking to his girlfriend, but I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
But he was going to try and kill me. Or he was, I don't know what he thought.
Right.
But I drew my gun faster. On another occasion, the guy's arguing with his wife. I arrived, me and my another policeman, and he gets so mad. He says, I'm going to go get my gun. So he walks into the house. And I asked the wife right away, does he have a gun? She says, he does. I said, okay. So both me and the other policeman, we stood there by the door, waiting for him to come out. We didn't draw our guns. We kept them in our holsters. But we were waiting. He never did. But if he had, we would have engaged him. And but there's many instances like that. I never had to shoot nobody, but I wasn't anxious to shoot anybody either. Only if my life really was a danger, and I came real close many times.
So how long were you in the police force?
I was there for 20 years, and I had gotten saved 8 years before I retired. And I was anxious to leave, to go into the mission field. And so I stayed 20. And after I came back, I went to Dallas, became a policeman over there with the transit police. They were starting a new police force. And I wound up being offered to be the firearms instructor. So I became their first firearms instructor. They also made me a detective, and they also put me in charge of the night shift. Now, the guys I was working with, they were all retired policemen, most of them from Dallas, and I was from San Antonio. We had a retired guy from Houston. They wanted only guys with a lot of experience and a college degree. So everybody that was coming into work had a college degree. But I stayed there for 2.5 years, and I didn't like Dallas, so I came back. Then I worked for the SAPD the second time. I put in 10 more years, but I was a civilian. I was at the front desk. And so total, on the streets about 23 years, wearing a uniform or plain clothes, because I did 5 years of plainclothes detective, and the other 10 years I was at the front desk. I wasn't a policeman at that time. I was a civilian.
Right. So how was it that you got saved? You got saved, you said 8 years before you retired. How did that happen?
Yeah, there was a friend of mine, detective. We were both on patrol, and we became real close friends. We had known each other for many years, but now we were working together. And he was having a lot of problems, and I was trying to counsel him, but I was giving him the counsel of the world. Just stay busy, stay active. I would take him and play tennis with him, and this kind of thing. But then he got saved. Another policeman. All of a sudden, in the early 1980s, a lot of policemen were beginning to get saved. Something happened. The Spirit of God came into our area, began to work in the lives of policemen. And one of them was very instrumental. He was telling everybody about the Lord. And he my friend wound up getting saved. It was on a night when he was about to commit suicide. He had gone to work for the last time. He had prepared his letter, had already written it. He had his wine bottle. He was going to come and drink and then blow his brains out. But he went to work one more night, and this other policeman witnessed to him. He was doing Fiesta Week. He wound up getting saved. So he didn't commit suicide. But because of that, he got saved. He got on fire for the Lord. He began giving gospel tracts. And since I worked with him, he would give me a gospel tract every single day. He gave me 10 in 2 weeks. I would read them. The rest of the guys would throw them away. I would read them. I would check them with my Bible. I hadn't read my Bible. And 10 days later, I asked the Lord to save my soul. I realized, good grief, I'm on my way to hell. And not because he told me. I was reading it in the gospel tract. It explained salvation. But then I was checking everything with the Bible. I began to read it. And then I realized I'm on my way to hell. With all what I thought my goodness, I'm splitting hell wide open. And it changed my life. Especially when I realized how much God loved me. I hadn't had a father in my life. And now I realized that the Father of Heaven had died for me. And it broke me so much. And I just wanted to serve him. And I began to tell people about Jesus. Everybody, every policeman I came in contact with, they began to run away from me. I would invite them for coffee. And they wouldn't show up. Or if there were two of them, one of them would flee the scene quickly. And I'd be with them, fingerprinting a car that they had found, because I was the detective, and I'd be talking to them. So I got to talk to so many. I'd make calls. I'd witness to everybody. I went to churches, go fingerprint, because they had broken in. I witnessed to Catholic priests, pastors of all denominations. I witnessed to everyone. And I continued until I retired, and I went to Mexico to be a missionary.
And there was quite a revival in the police department at that time, wasn't there?
It sure was. We began, a lot of policemen got saved, a lot of them. And a lot of them went on to become pastors of churches. And I realized also that I needed to go and preach in the streets from the church that I was going to, which you know it very well. They were, I started going there, and nobody was preaching in the streets that I knew of. So I went on vacation. I took my family to Mexico. I did it so I could go and learn and go preach in the streets in Mexico, so I could see what it's like to test myself. And I was out there with your dad the first time, and that's where I broke out. And after I preached several times, then I came here to San Antonio, and I had somebody that wanted to preach in the streets also, so we got on the streets. I began to take groups. I had already been doing a lot of going door to door. I was covering all of the west side, all of the south side, door to door with different partners. And then we began on the housing projects in San Antonio, every single one in the west side, the whole bunch of them. We preached in every block several times. And
what was the response of that?
We would have, I counted one time, 50 people had come out to listen to us while we were preaching. They'd be up on the second floor, or they'd come out, they'd bring out their chairs and sit down, and they listened to us. And we would preach real loud with the Bible in our hands. And we had workers, our own families. I would take my daughters, my wife, and other people, or other brothers and sisters would come. And we'd have maybe 10, and we'd be preaching. And we'd have big crowds, 50, I counted 50 one time. But it was not unusual to have about the same amount, over and over and over. It was a big revival here in San Antonio that I don't think it'll happen again, I don't know. But it was in the 1980s, and it was just amazing to me.
What was the response in door knocking at that time?
We would go door to door, and I started going with men. Then I started taking my wife with me. She wanted to go. And we would go, me and my wife, would go and knock on doors, and many times we'd wind up walking out at 12 midnight because they would invite us inside. They wanted to hear, they had questions. And I would take my Bible, I would take sometimes a Catholic Bible with me so I could answer from the Catholic Bible. And so I was reading, learning, I was studying 7 hours just about every single day, 7 days a week. I was so hungry for truth. But we spoke to thousands of people in their homes. And we were in the west side. We preached in the streets. We preached in front of dope connections. I knew where they were. And I would tell them, I say, okay, we got a dope connection right here. I'm going to go knock on their door, and we're going to invite everybody around here. And we'd preach. And by the time we'd finish, we'd have about 10 dope addicts waiting to make a connection, but they had to wait because we were preaching. And we'd witness to them, give them tracts. So it was extremely exciting. And we just, we were in love with the Lord. It was day and night thing for us. We wouldn't stop.
When you got saved, you were Roman Catholic, correct?
Right. Uh-huh.
But were you more like a nominal Catholic, or were you pretty devout?
We were very devout. My wife had started out, before she met me, she was thinking of being a nun. And so she wanted to serve the Lord. And so we got married. We always went to church. Not because I went or because I wanted. I went because she wanted. So I was obedient. We went to church. My kids, we took them all to church. They were all baptized in the Catholic Church. And before I got saved, we, when they started, the first thing before, I didn't leave immediately. It took me 6 months. In the meantime, I was a lector in my church, the Catholic Church. The lector means the one that reads in front. I would pass the plate. I was sponsors for the engaged. When somebody was going to get married, they'd pass them on to us. Me and my wife, we would counsel with them. We were very much involved. The priest would come and visit me many times at my house. We were not weak Catholics. We were very much involved. So when I got saved, I began to question them. It was Catholics that I began to question. I wanted some answers. They were giving me the wrong answers. They were not basing their answers from the Bible. And eventually I said, I'm in the wrong place. I need to follow truth. That's what the Bible tells me. The Bible says that he rejoiced that his children walk in truth. And so that's what I wanted to do. So we started to leave. And of course, my wife was a little bit hesitant. And I finally told her, I said, I'm leaving. You want to stay, you go ahead and stay. You want to take the kids to church, to Catholic, you go ahead. I don't want no trouble. But there's no way I can stay. I already know they're not teaching truth. I need to be where there's truth.
And what was her response to that?
Her response, as soon as I said that, she says, okay, I'll follow you. The only thing is, I don't want a denominational name, because I don't want to leave one religion and then join another religion. I want to make sure that we just follow the Lord. No problem.
Now, has she already believed by then?
She believed, but she was still trying to hang on to the Catholic Church. And so it was real hard for her. And she had more people trying to keep her, struggling. And but she followed me. We made a decision, and we didn't look back. We just kept on going, learning, and of course, I've learned so much since. But it got to the point where I also debated the highest-ranking Catholic priest in San Antonio on television, and I still got the tapes. Those were V8s, I think.
VHS?
Yeah. I still got it. I debated the man who was in charge of the San Fernando Cathedral. He had his own TV program. He was in charge of the seminary. He was top-notch. We debated. He avoided answering questions. The questions were on salvation. How does a Catholic get saved? What would you tell him? He wouldn't answer me. And I asked him 3 times. And I said, okay, I'll answer it. And I gave him the answer. And I gave him all scripture over and over. I knew it very well. But I took my Bible, and I also took the Vatican Council book, which nobody reads. I had it. And I had everything underlined. I was ready. I was armed with a lot of information. He didn't want to even believe that. But of course, later on, he fled the scene. He took off. He wound up becoming a professor in some university. I'm not sure which one it was, very famous one. And a few years ago, he got accused of molesting somebody as a priest. And instead of coming to answer, he committed suicide.
Really?
Yeah. So that's the man that I debated, the highest ranking priest in San Antonio. He wound up and he never repented of what he had done, never acknowledged it. Instead, he left a message. He left a note. I read it. I found it on the internet. I even know who was the attorney that the other people had gotten. Very famous attorney. He's on the billboards all the time advertising. But of course not for that, but for accidents.
Right.
But he was the one, and this guy, I guess, he saw him. They're going to ruin me. he wound up committing suicide.
Wow. So then, once you got saved, you stayed in the force another 8 years, and then you moved to Mexico as a missionary.
Right. I went there, and actually I left while I was still a policeman. What I did is I left in September 1988. I was still in the force, but I had so much time accumulated that they were not going to pay me. I had up to 90 days that I needed to burn, and that's what policemen would do at that time. They wouldn't pay you. So it was vacation time and comp time and all kinds of other time. It amounted to over 90 days. So I took off on leave, and so I was a policeman, but I was in Mexico, living in Mexico as a missionary, preaching in the streets. Came back in January and retired in January the 6th, 1989. And then went back again.
How long were you in Mexico?
I was there for about 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And I had come to visit my brother-in-law in Dallas. And I told him we were thinking of leaving Mexico. And while I was in Dallas, he said, Trini, they're hiring over here. They need some policemen. They're starting a new police force. And he got the phone and called. Since he was big shot with Southwestern Bell, at that time it was Southwestern Bell. It turned out into AT&T now. But anyway, he called the chief, got to talking to him. And then the next thing I know, the chief wants to talk to me, so I'm on the phone talking to him. Next thing I know, he wants me to go visit him real quick. I go go spend some time with him. He was from San Antonio. He had been a captain in charge of the academy at the Dallas PD, and he had been recruited. He was now the new chief, and he hired me. So I didn't have time no more to go back to Mexico and spend some more time. I had to make a decision. So I went ahead and decided, okay, I'll stay. So I just went to Mexico, got my things, came back, and I had a job, and became working as a transit policeman. And shortly after, I became their firearms instructor.
How was it? Your experience in Mexico? How would you categorize that?
It was fine. I liked, but I had a lot of trouble. First of all, we couldn't find a place to live. We went, and it took a long time, months. We were living with somebody else, another missionary, and we had a trailer that I had taken, very little small trailer. We were living, me and my wife, there. My other kids, I had to separate them with other missionary families, and so it was real hard for us. And living there and couldn't find a home, and finally we found one that had all kinds of holes in all the walls, and everything was real bad. But I had a lot of help. Your dad helped a lot. He built. We wound up renting it. He's the one that built me the kitchen, the cabinets, and so before long, we had it all painted. Everything was working good. And but then we evangelized the whole city. We preached everywhere, the park, every street, and we wanted to leave. We had decided, so we were decided on one city, far away, and I had been there 2 years, and we would go to this city. I forget the name of it, and we would go there. I would go there every week and spend several days looking for a place to rent, talking to some Christians, spending a lot of time with them. They knew a lot of people. Could not find a place to stay.
You mean like a house to rent?
Like a house to rent.
Uh-huh.
And there was one American that had stayed there from World War II. And he was an Anglo, didn't know Spanish, but he married a Mexican lady.
That happens a lot, actually. It's very interesting.
And
That's the language of love.
right. and he had built a house, and I went to go see it. He wanted to show it to me. Beautiful house. And I said, if you would rent it, how much would you rent it for? And I forget the amount he gave me. And I said, I'll double it. I need a house. I'll double the rent. I'll pay you. I'll rent it from you. I really thought I wanted to stay. And he rejected it. So I didn't get a house. So after that, after spending about a month going there every week, looking, talking, I had people looking for me, couldn't find a place. I decided, okay, I think it's the Lord's will for me to go back. And that's when I had come to visit. Next thing I know, I'm hired. So that's how it happened. I stayed in Dallas, and we stayed there for a few years.
Very interesting. So then once you left Dallas, you came back to San Antonio, right? And that's where you started working as a civilian for the police department. You went back to the church where you had been sent out of as a missionary.
Right. And actually, my intention was to start a work in Dallas.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I had a brother that went to Dallas also. We were both going to evangelize Dallas and what have you. So anyway, find out that there's no housing projects in Dallas. Everything is real nice, rich homes. I found us an area where Hispanics live, but even their homes were very nice. And but then he started having problems at home with his wife, and everything began to fall apart. And we started meeting at we were meeting at our house. We're having church at our home. That's where my daughters began to meet other guys and what have you. But anyway, they got married. But that was what we were doing. And finally, when they decided, my partner decided he wasn't going to meet no more, then I didn't want to be there alone. I decided to stop, and I began to go to churches. I looked real hard, trying to find a place where I could call home. And came to San Antonio to visit the church again. And that's when the pastor there told me, he said, Trini, we need you here. We need you to come back. And I just felt like the Lord was calling me back. So I left Dallas. I left a real good job. We're doing real good. So brought my family, came back to San Antonio and started again. And that's where I became a pastor shortly after.
Yeah, you were a pastor at that church for how long?
Oh, it might have been 10 years. I'm not even really sure how long.
It was a good amount of time, I remember.
And of course, we started preaching again. You know, going in the streets, preaching in the housing projects, going door to door, and just continuing to serve the Lord.
What is your take on how that's changed over the years? Because when, like you said, when you first started, like preaching the projects, you had a lot of people listening. The projects ended up closing down, right, to where you couldn't get in unless you lived in there.
That's correct.
I know there were some Christian groups that actually rented like a house or however they do it, but they got like a house in there so that they could have a presence in there.
Right.
The ones that had an outreach to drug addicts.
Yeah, and they began to put signs that it made it illegal. So now you would be trespassing, because the trespassing laws, there has to be a sign. And so now they were complying with the law. They had signs. So if you would go out there and go preach, you don't live there, you're trespassing. You could be arrested. So it kind of just ran us out. And but we were having good success. I'll just give you one story. We preached at one housing project, and right after that, I talked to a lady that had been listening, and she got very interested in learning, and I wound up giving her name to, because she didn't have any means of making it to church. So I gave her name to a pastor of a church, Spanish church, because she needed Spanish. They came and picked her up, began to take him to church, and I met this pastor later. He came to preach at our church again, and he told me, he said, "Trini, remember that lady you gave me her name?" He said, "Well, she came. She began to bring her friends, her neighbors, her relatives, and right now we have about 50 of her family members. They're all saved."
Wow.
Because of one lady. So it's amazing. You never know how the Lord works. People get saved, and I got saved, and all of a sudden, we brought a lot of people to church. One of the things I didn't mention, but when I got saved, my wife also, of course, we all got saved. She began to witness at school.
Because she became a school teacher, right?
Right. She was already a school teacher, and we wanted to get a Bible study going. So we began to invite people, and we invited everybody in the neighborhood. 200 and something homes that we went to. We made letters. We didn't deliver to every one of them. Nobody came. But teachers began to come. The first time we had it, nobody was there, only my family. I still taught. And then other people began to come. By the end of by April, I had a whole house full. And I had like about 12 teachers that had come. And they got saved. And they went on to serve the Lord. And I stopped because it was time for me to start on the streets in April to go preaching. And I stopped having the Bible studies at home. But it was very productive, just on teachers alone. It was just amazing.
Yeah. But nowadays, I mean, we do, well, since coronavirus has been, we haven't really known how to proceed, right? I don't know how to proceed right now. What do you think of that? I mean, what do you see as the future for evangelism in this time right now with the way things are?
Yeah. I don't go on the streets anymore because I know that they'll probably call the police on me, and they wouldn't want to talk to me. I'd be a stranger, then with a mask. Everything is wrong. So, I stopped completely. I can't do that. And just one thing that has happened just recently. I had somebody send me a text message, and it was a lady, and her name was Lillian. Later on, she told me her last name was Morales. But anyway, she said she had been listening to some videos, or what is it called, CDs. She called them CDs. And I said, wow, those were a long time ago.
Yeah, there were some members in the church and where you were a pastor that had that ministry. They would take your guys' preachings, right?
Right.
Like Sunday preachings, record them, and then they would put them, distribute them to truck stops.
Right.
And people could get them for free, right? They were for free.
Right.
So they'd put a whole bunch of CDs, and truckers could pick them up and take them and listen to them.
Yeah.
And they ended up going all over the world.
All over, even all the way to Cuba. They were telling me that they were being used in Cuba, in Mexico, and I got calls because he had my phone number. I was getting calls from all over the United States, even California. And they would call me and say, can you come and teach us? They thought that I lived right there. The same way from New York and all over the U.S., they didn't have my address, so they thought I was local. And one church wind up using those tapes to pass them on to people that didn't speak English in their church. So it went all over. It got reproduced. And just a few weeks ago, I get this call, this lady, and she says, I love your preaching. I've been listening to your CDs, and it's been a blessing. And I was so excited because I hadn't gotten one of those in years. And I told her, I said, well, those CDs were from long ago. And I gave her a little history. And I asked her if she was saved. And she said, yeah, I got saved. I don't know from what. She didn't say or give me too much detail, but she says, I got saved. He said, but I want you to continue preaching. He says, you are a blessing. And it just excited me a lot because that was after years and years. I just heard from somebody a couple of weeks ago. And she just wrote to me again yesterday. I don't know who she is other than first and last name. I don't know any of her testimony. I don't even know how old she is. It might be a little kid, or it might be a very old person. But I told her, this time I told her, I said, she says, are you real busy? I said, I'm substituting right now. I'm retired from the police. And you know, gave her a little bit of history on me, where she knows that I'm very old. She hadn't called me. She might have thought I was a young guy, you know, and I want to try and get to know him. And let her
She
know.
didn't tell you how she'd gotten a hold of those?
No, I don't even know where she lives or from what state, other than she calls me her friend, and she's real happy. She wanted me to pray for her, and I told her, I'll keep you in prayer, sweetie. I'll always be praying for you, and I'm so thankful. And if I don't see you, I'll see you in heaven. She was so excited, but I don't know anything else. And yesterday, I was at school, and she sent me another one. How are you, my friend? How are you doing? And that's when I told her, you know, who I really am, you know, a little history on me. And maybe I'll hear from her tomorrow or the next day.
I'd be very curious to know how she got a hold of the CDs.
Yeah, me too.
Because I mean that ministry that those two men did was far-reaching.
It sure was.
I mean, you would get a lot of phone calls from that.
Constantly.
Yeah. And when you think about it, these truckers, they're driving all the time, listening, and they're probably sick of the stuff they're listening to.
Exactly.
And here's something different.
Yeah.
And they put it on. They can drop it off somewhere else. They would take and scatter them, right?
Right.
I mean, these guys would go around to truck stops, I assume, in the vicinity. But then the truckers would take and scatter these all over the place.
All over. And they were even dropped in Mexico by airplane. Because one guy who got him, he says he landed in a cactus patch. He went and picked it up from there, but it was being dropped by airplane. He was from Mexico.
Wow.
And then the people from Florida, he said we're passing them out and they're going into Cuba. And I said, wow, it's just amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And
do you know if they're still doing that, or if they stopped doing that? Do you know where they're at with that?
I don't know, but I'm thinking this young lady, whoever it was, and I don't know if they're young or old, she might have found them, that somebody had them, because many times people get saved because of a gospel tract that somebody left there for years.
Yeah.
And she got a hold of somebody had my tapes. But they went all over the place, all over the United States. I even had a trucker that I went to go have coffee with him. He was coming by San Antonio, and he talked to me many times. He says, I want to go have coffee with you, go eat with you. And we went. I met him. But it was because he was traveling through San Antonio. But I had conversations with many, all the way from Minnesota all over the U.S.
This is really a good spot, too, to do that because of it being on the road to Laredo.
Yeah.
It's the last big city before Laredo.
Right. So to answer your question from a while ago, what to do, I think put in CDs or, tapes or what you're doing, that's the way to do it now.
I wonder how CDs would work. I agree with you. I think that doing something in that sense, digital, is where we're at least for the
Right.
moment. I don't know how long, but
Yeah.
at this particular time, probably so. The only thing I wonder is why I wonder if they're still doing it is that I don't know how many vehicles have CD players anymore.
Right.
And so how do you get it to them?
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Right.
Putting it online, I mean, you can see it, but the problem is how do you get them?
Yeah.
Do you I don't know. That's something needs to be considered. If,
Right.
maybe we have those little QR codes and you put it in the truck stop and say, hey, you can hear things here.
That's
I don't
true.
know. Seems like something we might ought to look into.
Right. It have to be that way because going door to door is beginning to be a lot harder, and especially with this virus.
Yeah. Yeah, it was already getting to be a diminishing returns on that.
Right.
I mean, I did street preaching when I came back from Mexico, starting the church at the south side, and I never had a single person come to the church.
Right.
Not one.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone ever had any, everyone ever went to another church. I have no idea, but
You're a bad preacher.
thank you. I appreciate that. Why don't you go back to your little computer screen? Nobody's asking you your opinion. This isn't your show.
Real sensitive.
Just go and break I was on a roll. Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I think one of the things that I regret is that we really missed the digital, the wave on the digital thing. I mean, now it's very saturated.
Yeah.
Right. If I would have started doing digital outreach back 10, 12 years ago when I started, it was a lot. We would have been the early adopters, and it's strange to me that I wasn't interested because I was always into computers, but for whatever reason, I didn't get into that.
Yeah.
And I'm not. And now the problem is when you're trying to do anything digitally is getting someone to see it. It's just so much stuff being published that it's almost impossible to find something like that unless you
Right.
unless you're really good at SEO and outreach and getting people to, social media, getting people aware that it's even there. You have to be aware it's there to know to look for it.
Right. I think the answer is through what you're doing, because in the Bible, John was told that he would have to preach to millions, to multitudes and tongues and nations, and then of course the two witnesses, which I've always thought that the Apostle John is one of them. The other one is Elijah, of course. But they're going to be witnessing, and the whole world's going to see them. So how the whole world's going to see them unless it's through computers, and when they kill them, and they're going to be they're going to see them for 3 days before the Lord takes them home.
Yeah, that a lot of Christians have always thought that was kind of a implied prophecy of television, right? That the whole world would see them. We think, well, that's TV. Now it looks like it's the internet.
Right, exactly.
Because TV's defunct.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't exist anymore practically.
5G now.
Yeah, it's going to be 5G.
Yeah.
Which shows that we don't really know what prophecy means because we keep revising it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's the answer, I think. But going door to door, especially now with, if I go, I had to take a mask. They'd probably call the police. There's a masked man outside.
That was funny. The other day they had it was a real police report came out and said that a man had robbed a store. They were looking for a masked man.
Yeah.
Used to be you wore a mask, right? And then took it off when you leave. Now you take it off, rob the store, and then put it on.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah.
So you blend in.
Yeah. Well, it used to be against the law when I came on to wear a mask in public. And it's amazing how now
it's the other way around.
Yeah, you have to wear a mask all the time.
I would think after seeing some people's face, we would make it a law that you do have to wear a mask. Definitely have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Breath. When you smell some people's breath, it's like you need to wear a mask. I'll tell you that right now. Hey, don't start whining now. You started it. So what is your plan going forward? You still looking for a new career?
Yeah, I'm trying to upgrade my resume.
I always love that about you.
Yeah.
You're always thinking about how you're going to make your resume look
Right.
better.
I've applied for different jobs, but and they don't ask you for your age.
No, they ask you when you graduate high school.
Yeah. And when I put in when I was in the Army, I said, good grief.
You might want to just go take, since you never really did the 12th grade, you should go and do the 12th grade.
No.
And then you can say you just graduated high school.
Well, I just got my diploma.
Well,
Yeah.
just give them that date.
Right. They gave me my diploma after 40 or 50 years later. I was in Beeville with all my friends. Anyway, there was somebody there that had been a lieutenant colonel, and he told me, he says, I can get your diploma. You didn't graduate from Beeville High School? I said, no, I joined the Army. He said, well, we have a program now that if you had to leave because of the military, you're eligible for your diploma. So again, the information, he went and got me. So now I have a diploma from Beeville, A.C. Jones High School. I'm a graduate, even though I've already got my bachelor's degree.
Well, that's how you need to answer the question.
Yeah.
They say, when did you graduate high school? You say, well, I just got my diploma like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
They'll be real shocked when you show up for the first day.
Yeah. Right.
They're
I
like,
got it
you
at the
look
age
old for your age.
Yeah. I got it at the age of 70. I was thinking 72, I think it was at the time, about 3 years ago. I'm about to be 75 next month.
Tell them you like to take your learning slow so it seeps in good.
Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. So now you're doing substitute teaching. How do you like that?
Well, I like it right now because I've got one student. And all the other ones are virtual. They're on the screen. And so I don't get to see them. And
You don't have to mess with them.
Right. And of course, I can see their faces. Most of them were eating their tacos or falling asleep. And I talk to them, and then I tell them, okay, now you go to this particular program on your screen. It's called Seesaw. And look for this program. And then after you finish that in 30 more minutes, then take a break. And then I'll see you back, and I give them, so I don't see him for another hour. So I just walk around the class, got one little kid, and then an hour later I come back, get on the screen, and I give him another assignment, and I'm off again for another hour.
And do you think they're actually doing the assignments?
No. But I'm getting paid.
I need to look into something.
I'm going to start doing substitute teaching. You got to figure out how to get rid of that one stupid kid that keeps coming. You got to start insulting them or something.
Right.
Call them names. Get them out of there. Give them some of that teaching they gave you.
Yeah.
Here, read. Pop, hit them on the head.
Yeah. No, it's first grade, and I wasn't looking for it, but they called me. They said, "You want it long term?" I said, "Yeah." They pay me $100 an hour. And then I work very little, and
$100 an hour or $100 a day?
$100. I'm sorry, $100 a day.
I was gonna say, let's go.
Yeah.
Forget this. Those cameras are gonna show the chairs turning. We're gonna be running to the school.
Right. No, so I'm enjoying it, because I have one student, and I've got another one. Actually, I had two, but his family took him to Mexico last week. Didn't come back. So probably this Monday he'll be back again. So I'll be back to two. But it's a piece of cake right now.
Oh, no kidding. And what is this going to look like once? I mean, I think whenever if I ever go and go to see a doctor, I'm going to find out what year they took surgery.
Yeah.
And if it was 2020, I think I'm going to find another doctor.
Right. Well, one of the things that's coming out in the news, nobody's learning anything. And from from what I see, I give them work. They're supposed to do a lot of work. But the kids call me right back 2 minutes later. I'm finished, teacher. I'm finished. I said, okay, come back in 1 hour. There's nothing I can do. I can just tell them. I'm, miles away from them.
Right now, I think that in this, I think what's going to happen is the kids that are very interested. Like I have a niece who loves school and will do all her schoolwork and do extra schoolwork, and no one has to push her. I think people that any kids that are like that are going to do very well. They're going to come out of this with a lot less competition in life, because the other kids that aren't self-motivated that way and don't really want to do schoolwork, they're fine just getting dumber, and they're going to be way behind. And then we're going to make rules that you can't discriminate against them for being. We're going to have anti-dumb discrimination laws where you can't discriminate for someone being dumb, and you're just going to kids. So these kids that are really self-motivated, they're going to be far up in they're not going to have very much competition going into life. Is the way I see it coming out. Yeah, crazy.
But in the high schools, I come across kids when I'm subbing over there. When I was subbing, kids in high school, some of them didn't know how to read. Yeah, and it's real sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
It's sad.
They weren't learning much before this.
No, this isn't a huge fall in academic pursuit. I mean, you're talking about before this all happened. You were finding kids like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, learning was not doing too well in America.
Right.
In a lot of places. And this has certainly made it worse.
Right.
For many, many people. It's really sad. And I think there's a lot of kids. I'm not trying to. I don't want to sound like I'm. What do I say? Criticizing kids, or people who aren't terribly self-motivated to learn. Not everybody is.
Right.
But a lot of them, if they had the right teacher in there motivating them, they were doing well. And now they're not doing well at all.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of them are not doing well at all. It's really pretty sad.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah. So that's where you're at now, and what kind of careers are you looking into?
Well, let me see. I keep forgetting. I'm different ones, but having to do with law enforcement. Yeah. But I know once they read my, resume or what, they probably think I'm about to fall dead. So.
Well, we have a huge audience, and so you can plug your career, and you might get a call from someone in the audience.
I just went and requalified with the SAPD. I have to do it every year, and I went and shot 100, and so I can still shoot. And
you might be rethinking that, not shooting the people when they're running away now, though, right?
Yeah, right.
Not going to run after them no more.
No. I used to.
Yeah.
I was so dumb. I learned little by little.
What did you learn?
Well, I used to run. I used to get out of my car and just take off. Somebody running with a gun, and I'm right behind them. And later on, I said, "Wait a minute. I'm tired by the time I get to them." So then I would start chasing them with my car, taking my time. And by the time you catch up to them, you're fresh and they're tired. Or like on a fight. I see a fight, I used to jump right in. Everybody's still fresh. I learned, take my time, close the door slowly, and walk. By the time I get to them, they're tired. They don't want to fight no more. Easy. But you learn that from experience.
Yeah. I always think it's hilarious in movies when they have someone chasing a car down. They'll have the hero chases after some car. Yeah. That car would have to be driving 7 miles an hour for him to even have a chance to touch the bumper.
Right. Yeah.
It's hilarious. Yeah. They'll chase him for blocks.
Yeah.
It's even more stupid when they actually catch the car.
Yeah. Yeah, they catch it and they jump on it. It's like, how slow that car has to be going? You can't hardly drive a car that slow if you wanted to. Yeah. That is so funny. So you learned that chasing them down with the cars makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah. That comes with experience.
You know, there's some other friends of ours in our church that are policemen that they maybe need to stop chasing people in cars and start doing a little bit of running.
Yeah,
Slim down a little bit.
Right.
A little they're a little on the policeman side of things.
yeah. But I thought that I was going to stop all crime. I really did. That's how ignorant I was. Come from a small town.
Don't most policemen
Yeah.
start with that kind of ambition?
Yeah, I think so. We were, an emergency would come out, man, I was jumping on it. I'm on the way, And after a while, I realized, slow down, you can't be, and crime's going to continue.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop. People are still going to be getting drunk every week. They're going to beat their wife every week, I thought I was going to stop it.
Yeah.
And then I realized,
That you're just there to control it for the
yeah,
day
that's right.
till the next shift comes on.
That's it.
Does that get disappointing or discouraging, or were you able to make peace with that?
No, you realize it after a while, and that you're not going to make a dent. I tell you where it really makes a difference when you talk to them about the Lord, and I'll give you an example. One prostitute, I went around the block at nighttime. It was 11 o'clock. I was just coming into work, and I'm going way to the deep west side, but I went through Guadalupe Street, and I saw a prostitute walking. So what I did is I went around the block, and it was during cold weather, and I came in, and as she was going to cross the street, I was parked right there. I opened up my window, and I called her, and I told her, I said, you ever heard of hell? That was my way of witnessing to her. You ever heard of hell? She started crying. And I said, why are you crying? She said, just today, a friend of mine just came and told me the same thing. And the one who had told her was a guy who had a ministry, who had been a burglar and a dope head all his life, and then he got converted, became a Christian. He was out evangelizing all the people in the streets. She had been his partner in crime, and he had just witnessed to her that day, told her the same thing. And I said, well, I'm a Christian. That's why I'm telling you, sweetie. You don't need to be doing this. And I began to tell her about the Lord Jesus. And the next thing she says, sir, can you give me, she was crying real hard, can you give me a ride home? I said, sure. I violated all the rules. She got in the police car. I took her home. I witnessed to her all the way. And she cried the whole time. Went and dropped her off. But I saw where she lived. 2 weeks later, I went to go visit her with my wife. Went and knocked on the door. And the lady, her mama, she says, no, she's not here. She's a Christian now. She thought that, I was looking for a date or something. I said, I'm a Christian, I'm a policeman, and I talked to her about Jesus. She said, well, she got converted.
Wow.
And she had been in the streets forever, a prostitute, dope head. The Lord changed her life. And all because I went around the block, and that's how I greeted her. Have you ever heard of hell? And I told her, because that's where you're going and you continue in this life. She wound up getting saved. All the times she had been arrested, and probably had been arrested many times, never did nothing. But the Lord changed her. And she was off the street. She married somebody. And I was so amazed. So you never know.
But that's the way to make a difference in people's lives.
That's how you make a difference. Not by putting them in jail. Of course, as a policeman, you have to.
Of course.
When they break the laws, that's what has to be done. But they need to get the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's what changed her. That's what changed me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Trini,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming in and doing the podcast with us.
Thank
and incredible, interesting life you've led.
Yeah.
And we wish you all the luck in your future endeavors and your career going forward.
Yeah, I want another career. I want to start again.
I love that about you. I think that's fantastic. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
I think it's just amazing, and your energy and everything is astounding to me, and I admire it and admire what you've done. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. Next week, we will be here at 9 a.m. with Danny Dalross. And no, we will not be talking about marriage. At least not if I have anything to do about it. I don't know. He'll probably try to work it in. I assigned him a topic that is as far from marriage as I could possibly discover and find. We were going to talk about, wait for it, insurance. We're going to talk about insurance. And he's going to figure out any way he can to work marriage into that. I know he is. So we're going to work real hard at keeping him off the topic. Anyways, Danny Dalross will be here next week, Saturday, 9 a.m. Have a great day.